do-nothing mayor, know-nothing mayor, except that girl likes to party all the time. Except she likes to party all the time. Except she's poison. And you know those songs, never trust a big butt and a smile. Never trust a big butt and a smile. In your Madam Mayor Stephanie Rawlins, that spends more time in the central business district of Harbor East, inside of the Four Seasons Hotel, inside of the bars, and in between the sheets than she does in the streets of the central district of downtown. So she knows more about what's going on in the central business district of Harbor East and Four Seasons Hotel, probably getting her drink on right now as we speak. Getting her drink on right now as she was over there last Friday night with Sean Malone and Sean Malone's fiance, his wife, Lisa Harris Jones. I'll get into that later on in the show. But your mayor have never said she want to meet with the governor to find out what's going on in central booking. If she stopped central hooking herself, she might know what's going on in central booking. If she stopped running around here acting like a central hooker, she might, a 5-star chick, she might know what's going on in the city right now. But I think she'll probably introduce a resolution or have one of them mental midgets on the city council introduce a resolution to move the mayor's office over to Harbor East with one of her Teflon daddies, John Patarakis. And you look forward to that to be coming up soon. They probably want to introduce a resolution to move the mayor's office to the Harbor East. And I'll be hearing some of you dum-dums remember, I think that's an excellent idea. I think it's really good. Now tell your mayor, grow up, man. She needs to grow up is what she got to do. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, man, your governor, the ego megalomaniac who was meddling and interfering in the affairs, even spying and surveilling on some of your elected officials around the city and around the state, even in the rural areas. Even college presidents, as we found out through his emails and text messages, he was concerned more about the president at that time of Coppin State, Reginald Avery, as opposed to worrying about what was going on in the state pen. He was interfering with what was going on in one of the state institutions, man. Showing you he's a megalo-egomaniac wanting to have his tentacles or tentacles all around this state right now. Having total control is what he wants. And then if he can't be there, he put one of his minions, one of his B-hoys or one of his Muldoons in there. Go to Howard County, he sent one of the Enright brothers to be there to be his watchman. And others. This is what the politicians, most of them do, the politricians. Make sure that their people are in positions to keep an ear out and an eye out for him. In the meanwhile, he wasn't looking at what was going on at these institutions, man. And if he's listening, he can call. If any of his minions or mental midgets out there listening, they can call. If any of his hitmen like Dan Friedman are out there listening, the assistant attorney general who wants to be the next judge on that court. So let's wait and see what happens now. Let's wait and see if they put him on that court to replace the absentee due to the required retirement at the age of 70 that Judge Bell had to just go through. But again, you're tuned to the state of the city. As we're looking at, again, your governor, your Teflon leprechaun governor, who thought, again, as I said, that his session was complete and he could get on a plane and go to Israel. You remember he wanted to go till he had that debacle at the Democratic National Convention when he came out drunk. I'll say alleged, when he came out drunk as a skunk. When he came out drunk as a skunk at that DNC convention and was probably outshined by many and plenty, such as Kamala Harris and others out there on the West Coast. But your governor didn't want to go then to Israel. And so he waited to go to Israel. And I guess he thought that he was going to go to Israel, even though this story regarding the corruption in the institutions was known at least since last spring. At least since last spring, if not as far back as 2006. And the only thing he wants to do now is pass the buck, which is he's good at doing that. He's good at passing the buck. He wants to pass the buck and say, well, this was the Ehrlich administration. It was the Republicans that did this. Or he wants to pass the buck to the feds, man. But again, you have to take responsibility for your actions. And if he's going to take responsibility for the eds, the meds, the beds, and everything else, then you got to take responsibility for the feds having to come in here as well. You're going to take responsibility for the eds and the meds and the embeds and everything else that you like to talk about. Take responsibility for the feds having to come here to clean up your doo-doo, to clean up your manure, to clean up your mess. It's what you got to do. But I don't blame O'Malley. I blame his father-in-law. I blame his wife. I blame his in-laws that knew he was an outlaw. Those are the ones I blame. I blame them mental midgets that they put around him. I blame them B-Hoys and Maldoons. I blame some of them women like Stephanie Rawlins, Sheila Dixon, and others that wanted to tell him what he wanted to hear as opposed to telling him what his ass needed to hear. Now, those are the ones that I blame. His partners in crime, those that co-signed for him are the ones that I blame. Those are the ones that have to bear the blame regarding what we've been seeing that's been going on regarding the corruption in the city of Baltimore and in the state of Maryland. But let me move on. Let me move on and keep this going, man. As I said before, that now we have to look at your governor who thought that he could, get out of town, get on a plane, go to Israel, and he thought maybe that he was going to come back. He was going to come back and bask in the sunlight. And if anybody ever needed some sunlight, if there ever was a white man that needed a tan, God knows he does. God, and I'm not talking about a redneck tan, man. I'm not talking about a redneck tan. If there ever was somebody that needed some sunlight, if there ever was somebody that needed a little more color, then clearly he would be the one. But I think he wears more makeup than probably his wife. I think he wears more makeup and Maybelline than his wife does, man. But again, he thought that he could go to Israel after he thought he had a successful session, go to Israel and come back a week later at the height of his peak. Then he didn't look at what the old saying goes, what lies beneath. What lies beneath, which came to the surface. And he thought, of course, that maybe he and his task force, which was assembled last spring in terms of the federal investigation of the state prisons, and it's not just two institutions, but state prisons, plural. So they knew since last year, 2012, do the math. And of course, he was the one that always said, let's move Maryland what? Forward, not backwards. Forward, not backwards. Well, if you don't want to have no hearings, then clearly you want to move it backwards, not forward. You do not see the dignity. You do not see the equality. You do not see the respect that the correctional officers are due, that state employees are due, that the general public that goes in and out of those institutions are due, that inmates that are in your custody, that the state of Maryland makes money off of because they get federal dollars. Why do you think they do a census when they send your loved ones to Hagerstown in Western Maryland and these other institutions? Because they make money off them black bodies, them brown bodies, them red bodies, them yellow bodies, and them white bodies, but predominantly them black bodies they making money off of. So O'Malley becomes your daddy. The state becomes your mother, your father, your uncle, because they're the ones that give you the 3 hots in the cot. They're the ones that are responsible for you to be able to get that pot up in the joint, if you know what I mean. They're the ones that's responsible for you to be able to do all of that. And they're the ones that's supposed to protect you while you're in their custody, man. That's why what Comptroller Francho says is so important. That how many more lawsuits, how many more payouts do we have to pay out for your governor and others who are responsible ultimately for turning a blind eye to what was going on, except perhaps they were getting their cut. Except perhaps they might have been getting their cut, man. And this is why they want you to confine it to just talking about who was on duty and who was giving up the booty. They want to confine it to who dropped their panties or who dropped their drawers as opposed to who dropped the damn ball, man. Who dropped the ball is what we're supposed to be asking. But they just titillate your little, lower desires, and that's all you want to focus on. All you want to focus on is who got the sex as opposed to cause and effect and what came next and what should be done next. Because every brother, every man, every woman, every child that goes in that institution right now, I know your governor think he signed the death penalty repeal bill yesterday, along with the NAACP National President Ben Jealous. He could have said something about this mess that's going on in the state of Maryland. He could have opened his mouth to talk about mass incarceration, but the NAACP is silent on this. The Urban League is silent on this. National Action Network is silent on this. And some of these other organizations that go in and out of the institutions, Christian organization, Muslim organization, Moorish Science organizations, 5% organizations, Sunni organizations, Bilalian organizations that go in and out of them prisons, voluntary organizations. Everybody should have something to say regarding this mess. Because your loved one that gets locked up tonight could be his last night, her last night, their last night on the planet. And your governor walking around telling he signed the Death Penalty Repeal Act. Yeah, on paper, but as long as you got them conditions existing inside the institutions, every human being that go in that institution, once them doors shut, there's no guarantee they coming out there alive. That's why it's important to have this hearing. There's no guarantee they coming out there alive. So as I said before, how in the hell they can protect the primates in the zoo, but they can't protect inmates or the general public when they come inside their state institutions? And you ain't got sense enough to press him and stress him to say, wait a minute, Martin O'Malley. You're going to go around the world to talk about you, the head of Homeland Security governor, but you can't protect these institutions? And the reason why they ain't thinking about it, and the reason why they don't want you talking about it and squawking about it, because most of the population in there are black. They poor. So they come from families that they look at and say, well, they don't vote, so they don't count. You know, they say your vote don't count if you don't vote. Well, they don't think about you. That's why you got to inject yourself into the conversation. And in these organizations, they're talking about they ex-offenders organization. They're a Muslim organization, Christian organization, this kind of organization, that kind of organization, or you just an ordinary man and woman that's paying tax dollars. You got a right to know. At a time, the state's saying they don't have no money for your programs, but they're going to keep paying out money for the death, the beating, the maiming, the injuring of inmates and correctional officers. And where's Doc Cheatham and the rest of them that was running around here talking about officers in blue have family too? Well, don't those correctional officers that's doing the right thing, don't they deserve the right to know that we got their back out here, man? Don't they deserve the right to know that there should be a hotline set up that they can call to report other officers that are turning a blind eye to corruption, or report elected officials, wardens, deputy wardens, commissioners, lieutenants, sergeants, captains? I come out in the Nation of Islam, so I know about general orders. You can't teach me a thing about no general orders. I know about taking charge of your post, all temple property and view, walking your post in the perfect manner, keeping always on alert, to report all calls from posts more distant than my own, to receive, obey, and pass on orders from all commanding officers, officers of the guard, and non-commissioned officers of the guard only, or the sentinel, to allow no one to be a nuisance on or near your post. Those are general orders. Somebody dropped the ball on that and has to be held responsible for that. I could go on and on and on with general orders, but I'm not trying to impress you with what I know. But I know what your governor's doing is a massive cover up. I know what your attorney general's doing is a massive cover up. And why is that? Why is that as we look at this now? Because, as I said before, that they conveniently, man, was out of town, or your governor was conveniently out of town when the story broke. So the media is complicit. If you pick up the Sun paper now, the Sun paper done moved this story to page 3 or page 4. It's not on the front pages anymore. So if you haven't figured it out, they're complicit in wanting to cover it up. Nobody wants to ask the questions, as I said before, around the murders, the death, the beatings, the maimings, the injuries of inmates and correctional officers, state employees. So again, we have to look at this, man, and do the math and add it up. How many inmates and guards, correctional officers rather, have been killed over the past 6 to 7 years since Gary Maynard was the Secretary of Public Safety? And of course, they're responsible for much more than just the institutions. They're supposed to guard your DNA and everything else that they're collecting. You know, you've been to Central Book and they tell you you're not getting out of here unless you give up some DNA. They tell you you're not getting out of here unless you give up some DNA. But again, man, so we see this massive mess, this massive cover up, this convenient cover up from the great pretender, Martin O'Malley, that don't want you to ask no real questions, and has sent even his minions into meetings with other delegates and other senators. And I'm sure as I speak, they're making phone calls to them right now, telling them that we don't want this information getting out. We don't want you asking no questions, man. Again, regarding what's been going on in the state prisons, because again, it embarrasses the governor, but it indicts the governor. It indicts his public secretary, or his secretary of public safety, Gary Maynard, and rightfully so. But again, as we look at this, man, you have as I connect the dots, reveal the plots, man. You have again your public safety secretary, Gary Maynard. You have again your attorney general, Doug Gansler, who wants to run for governor. You have your lieutenant governor, Anthony Brown, who wants to run for governor. Notice the silence. You have the state's attorney, Greg Bernstein, who wants to run for attorney general. Silent. And the only thing he can do is he say, fight crime, not us. He went and arrested the lead investigator in the death of Felicia Barnes, Detective Nicholson. But this the same lily white hypocrite Bernstein that would tell Patricia Jessamy, fight crime, not us. But now we see him fighting good police officers inside of the Baltimore City Police Department. A year after they claimed Nicholson was looking for his daughter and was knocking in some doors, they come back almost a year later now and arrest the man. But yet he got a nerve that